very excited about every CF master class, but this one as well, because the woman who's sitting beside me and who we're talking about is Beth Vanstone, who I love and is a CF mom in Canada. She has two daughters, Jessie, who does not have cystic fibrosis, and Madi, who does have CF. And to say, Beth, that you're an advocate doesn't really say enough about what you do in Canada and around the world to help other CF parents. And I'm so glad that we are talking today because the world needs to know who you are. Beth and I connected via social media and became close friends, and we've since met in person several times, and it's really important as we travel around in this CF Masterclass that we hear Beth's incredible story. So welcome to the CF Masterclass. I'm so glad that so many people know who you are and everything you've done, and now so many more will hear your story.
Oh, thanks so much, Laura. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you again and to work alongside such a powerful advocate for not only CF patients, but the rare disease community as a whole. And, as CF being a rare disease, we're kind of a powerful force in that space because it's not as rare as some rare. And just your friendship, your mentorship, it all means so much to us. And I think we're always stronger together. So thank you so much for having me on.
That is so true, and we are. And first, I always start with everybody's diagnosis story because I think everybody always wonders how that road was. So tell us about CF coming into your life and how the diagnosis went.
Okay, so and it's interesting, Laura, because each story is so different. Some people don't even have a suspicion until much later. Um, I knew there was something going on with Maddie probably within weeks of her birth. Like it was my second child. I knew what my healthy child had developed like, and Maddie just wasn't having the same milestones. She was sick all the time, congested. I would see her little chest, sucking in and out. She wasn't gaining weight, and I had her back and forth to our general practitioner probably weekly for months. And it is a rare disease, so sometimes diagnosis takes a little bit longer. We didn't have newborn screening at the time, and my doctor simply said she's getting a cold, and her sister were passing it back and forth. As moms and dads, we know in our hearts, we know our kids and we know what's right and we know what's wrong. And I just knew it wasn't right. I kept pushing. At that time, that was before I became a much stronger advocate. And this is part of the journey to becoming an advocate, I think, is just kind of realizing that sometimes you just got to listen to yourself and do what you think is right. And I went back, and Maddie her weight had dropped from 18 pounds at 7 months or at 6 months to 12 pounds at 7 months. So she'd lost a significant amount of weight. And we were sent to a pediatrician the next day. And the pediatrician literally sent us directly to the hospital. And Maddie was admitted with her first case of pneumonia. Um, when we were in there, the pediatrician said she wanted to rule out cystic fibrosis. And I was like, The test was going to be held down in Toronto because our Toronto Sick Kids Hospital was one of the only places that did the diagnostics for cystic fibrosis. I researched, as we all do. I was Dr. Google, and I was like, no, we're good. You're just automatically going to that. It's not happening to us. I read about it. I didn't want it. And I was pretty sure that, she got better after her admission. She was starting to gain weight again. I wasn't aware of any cystic fibrosis cases in our family. So I'm like, I think we're good. Until my mother-in-law, who did a little investigating, found a cousin of my husband's that had passed away from CF. And I was like, oops, I guess we better go and rule it out. We went down, we did the sweat test, very non-invasive, easy peasy test. They said, you'll probably get a letter in 2 weeks just confirming that it's not CF. Carry on. Well, my husband, I was at the gym at that time and working out, and my husband walked in. He works in construction. He had all his construction gear on, and I was like, what are you even doing here? This was like the Tuesday after the Friday test. And he started crying. he said, we have to call the doctor. And I thought, oh my goodness, I thought it was him. I was so
Mhm.
sure that this wasn't going to be part of our life that I thought it was something wrong with him. And he said, no, it's Maddie. And we went into his truck and called her pediatrician. And the pediatrician was like, just be careful, drive here. We're going to have a talk. And the seriousness just came down, just washed over us. The next day, we were down at Sick Kids for a full day of teaching because there is so much to learn about cystic fibrosis, as you and anybody that's in this space knows. We learned about all the drugs, about our enzymes, about our therapies, about masking, about mixing masks, and um, yeah, and that was our diagnosis, and it was pretty heavy and frightening, as everyone realizes, and questioning yourself, am I going to be able to do this? That was my big question. I don't know that I can do this. So it's a long story for a short diagnosis, but that's it.
No, I think that's a great way, and all the details of the diagnosis are really important, and hearing from the husbands too, because my husband was crying on the porch with me when, when I got the word first. And I think the husband's side of it too is real important as well. So I'm glad you shared that. Um, from that diagnosis, how did things go, and when did advocacy come in?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons people jump into advocating and wanting to be part of the solution. I think you're not given a lot of choice. You're either going to sink into the anxiety and depression and everything that's involved in trying, or you can maybe just try and be part of a solution. And right away, I just was like, I can't just sit in these feelings and do nothing. It's not how I'm made up. So right away, we contacted the CF Foundation in Canada and said, what can we do? How can we help? And we started, of course, by raising money, and joined what we have, the Great Strides Walk. I believe it's in the US as well. We had a couple of teams with both girls, and Maddie was participating in every study that came up. Like, she was young, so initially it was me making those decisions until she was older. I think there was only one study that and we jointly decided, turned down. And at that time, she was very sick and doing a lot of extra therapies already to try and stay healthy. And it was one that it was extra therapies over and above was part of the study. And I'm just like, well, you know what, Mad, no, like you're doing hours already. So, but other than that, we took part that way. Um, and what happened was when the first gene modulator, Kaleidocope, came in, Maddie was one of the 3%, 3 to 4% that this drug was supposed to be effective for, because she had that rare mutation. So at that time, I really had no clue what a gene modulator was, what this drug could or couldn't do. We had been on, like, there are so many drugs that treat the symptoms of cystic fibrosis. So, it's like, she's rare. We'd like to try her on this drug. It was a drug that we did, or a trial that did a week of placebo, a washout, and then another week. We didn't know which month was the month that she was going to be on the drug. So she did 30 days on, 30 days off, 30 days on something else, washout. Anyways, within, I think, a day or two, I realized that she was on Kaleidocope, because she had been so sick. She literally had no life. She was laying on the couch. She had tummy ache. She had chronic sinus problems. She was, how it is. It was
Right.
awful. Like, she was not living her life. She wasn't having play dates.
How old was she at that time?
She was 10, I think, 10, 11, when she did the trial. And one evening, I think maybe the second evening that she had been on Kaleidocope, she took a breath and she said, Mommy, I can breathe through my nose. And I said, what? I had no idea that she couldn't. Like, you just assume, but
Right.
her sinuses had been consistently so congested that she couldn't even breathe through her nose. And it was something that hadn't been looked at, diagnosed, or anything at that time. Her headaches, no wonder she had headaches all the time. So, anyways, her lung function, after we went through all the testing, her lung function went from low 70s to 115% of expected value. Now, for those that aren't in our CF community, um, that is a number that is compared to children, her age, her size, her weight. It's not a number specific to CF kids. So she was like 115% of what anybody else in her age and size would be, which was just incredible. She started gaining weight. She was off the couch. She had energy. She was playing. And it was like our miracle in a little blue pill. What happened was after the trial, we assumed, like many of us do, that she could get the drug in Canada through our insurance. So I sent it off. We got the prescription. We sent it off to the insurance company, and they were like, a negative. It wasn't covered. We went to our government because a lot of drugs are covered on our formulary, and it wasn't covered. So the drug was $350,000 a year, and we didn't have access, and we needed that drug to save her life. So I wrote to the insurance company and begged them, and they said they would cover 50% of the drug. We had friends that said that they would fundraise. How do you fundraise that much money? But they were willing, they were stepping up. So, and then the drug manufacturer offered a 30% discount. So that left us with about $6,000 a month to cover this drug for Madi to stay on. Obviously, that was not sustainable. Despite our community, and this is a shout out to everybody who stepped up and did fundraisers, we kept her on for over a year with fundraising. And that was $6,000 a month. So at that time, we said, well, the drug, people aren't going to continue to sell cupcakes forever, and there are 118 other people in Canada that will benefit from this drug that have this same rare mutation. So we started advocating. We went to Queen's Park, which is like the head of our provincial government, several times. We worked alongside our MPP, who is our member of parliament, provincial parliament, who worked amazingly, and for over 11 years until his retirement, he continued to work with the CF community and rare disease community. Eventually, we attended meetings. Vertex flew in to do meetings to negotiate, and we had the head negotiators there. We were at every meeting outside. We were not part of the meeting. We were outside, and media was there, and it was very highly publicized, our fight, because it just wasn't right. It was at that time that I realized that this was not just a CF problem. This was a rare disease problem. Anyways, after 2 years, the battle was won. Kalydeco was added to our provincial formulary, and eventually across Canada, each provincial formulary. Madi has remained on the drug. Since then, Kalydeco, she switched to Trikafta probably 2 years ago. So, that was my dip in my toe. It wasn't even dip in my toe. I had to just jump right in, and I had no clue what I was doing. I had Madi and I just taking on the world. But, there was other people. We had Chris McLeod, who you've had on your podcast before, amazing resource, who walked this walk with us. He had gained access through Compassionate in Canada and was the first Canadian.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things I learned from you, and I remind myself of all the time, is we are not just fighting for our drug. We are not just fighting for us. And one thing you have always said is there's another drug, and there's more people that are going to need it. You don't just fight for your drug and walk away. So talk about that philosophy that you believe in so strongly, and that came about while you had started this fight.
Well, I think it's really eye-opening when you're in a situation like this to realize that, you can be self-focused and focus on your problem and the immediacy of that problem and think that you can fix that and be done. But if you're not fixing the entire problem, the situation that caused this problem in the first place, yourself or other people are going to be in the same spot you are. So while we were doing this fight, I was seeing people around that needed rare cancer drugs that weren't accessible to them, that wanted off-label cancer drugs to give them a fighting chance. And my eyes were quickly opened to say that this is happening to us, but it's happening to others. Why is this happening? Where are the glitches in the system that is allowing Canadians to have these stockades to life-saving therapies? And I quickly realized that it was all the way through our system. There was just roadblocks everywhere. Drugs have changed incredibly since we first had an aspirin. We have gene specific therapies now and personalized medicine. And, our system was just not designed to support patients' access to those drugs. I watched patients pass away while we were fighting for Trikafta. A girl that was my daughter's age now passed away because our system is so broken, and that could be any of our children, and that's not okay. And I just personally, and Maddie as well, like my daughter who's 22 now has been advocating since she was 11 for access to medications in the rare disease community. We just can't allow that to happen, and we have to use our voices to make those that have the power aware of the changes that need to be made and why they need to be made. And I think that's what's really spurred me on, because it will affect us. Right now the current modulator is only effective in 90 to 95%. There's a portion of our CF population that is being missed. That's not okay. We cannot allow ourselves to be complacent with a drug that only supports part of our population. We're also waiting for the cure. Like, I think we're on the brink of a cure. Like, we have come so far. However, what is the point of getting to those ends if we're not going to have access to the medications? If people are going to die waiting because our system is not designed to allow people fast access to these drugs that are going to save their lives. It's about working together, all stakeholders coming together, keeping the patients in the center of the focus. Like, how can we all work together? We do not need to work against each other. And our governments are much the same. They are viewing pharma as the enemy, and they're not. You need to work alongside. But as long as you are looking and having these adversarial relationships and totally bypassing the needs of the patients, nothing's going to change. They need to reach out together.
And I have to say that I think there is so much misinformation that people in the United States and in Michigan, and I'm calling out Senator Camilleri because I have heard him misspeak about Canada, and I've told him, tried to educate him about how all these drugs are not less expensive in Canada, and they're, the answer isn't just in Canada. All the Americans don't just go get their drugs in Canada. Can you dispel that wrong belief that so many people in the United States think that, oh, Canada, they've got it down. They're, getting all these drugs so cheaply, and how that's actually backfired to Canadians?
Well, we actually, Laura, just to clarify something, many of our drugs are cheaper in Canada, and we do negotiate. The backside of that is that we probably have, and I'm throwing out some numbers here, and there are so many numbers involved, but we probably have only 60% of the drugs for rare diseases available in Canada that are available in the US because of the way our market is set up. So yes, we do negotiate, but in the negotiation, a lot of them aren't approved and we don't have access. Companies aren't submitting to Canada because our system is so difficult, and there's no
right, your government thinks it's too expensive.
Absolutely. So
and and I guess I want you to keep going, but that's one of the things I was trying to point out in Michigan and across the country. Everyone's saying drugs are too expensive. We have to do the same thing that Canada is doing, and really we need to learn by example of what's happening in Canada, which you're now talking about.
100%. So we can look around the globe, and you and I are involved in this rare space and do look around, and there are ways for things to be done. I understand that governments only have so much money. You know, I'm not so naive to think that a pharma company can make a drug and can put on whatever price they want and governments have to pay. I get that, but I also understand that there is a middle point. There's a point where governments and manufacturers can meet for the betterment of patients. And I think that's what we have to look at. There are solutions, there are to make it less expensive to market these drugs into these countries. You know, let's use real world evidence, right? Let's use the same trials and make a benchmark so that trials do not have to be repeated and repeated for every single country. Let's cut the costs are so substantial in getting these disease drugs that are for so few people, you know, and that's what we really have to take into account. Like, I consider us, I just did a post the other day actually about CF and how we are very lucky that we are one of the few rare diseases that has such an effective treatment and that has so many people having access to it. Because I think there's only 2% of rare diseases that actually have effective treatments, right? Something like that. It's very, very low because we have small markets, extremely small markets, a lot of investment to hit these diseases at the genetic levels and actually not just treat symptoms, but treat the underlying cause of the disease. So much science, so much time, so much money.
And to also, you know, show what you're saying is Trikafta, and it could be any drug, but in this specific situation, we're talking about Trikafta. Trikafta approved in the United States, October of 2019. A year later, in the UK, not in Canada. Then Canada gets it next. So it's not like you're getting it first. You know, your system is challenging. All of our systems are challenging.
We are on the bottom of the G7 in our length of time to get drugs. That's embarrassing. We need to do better than that. And we need to learn from the other countries around the globe that are looking at solutions to do it better. I will recognize there is a definite problem and there is only so much money to go around, right? But you can't expect one partner or the other to do all the work. You can't expect for governments to just pay whatever the price is thrown out there. I get that. But you can also look at your politicians and government to find solutions to make it more affordable to get these drugs to patients. So until we have everybody working on the same page with our patient as a center point, until we have that, we're going to just keep running into problems. There's outcome-based agreements, you know, where the risk is shared. So the patient is given the drug, and depending on the outcome, either the government pays a part or the manufacturer says, okay, that's on us, it didn't work. You know, so there are a lot of different ways to share the risk and to make these treatments available to patients. And that's what we have to start looking at. And in Canada, we have been hearing the talk for years now. You know, it's all buzzwords, you know, you just hear it over and over. And it's like, when is it going to be implemented? We don't even have an orphan drug designation in Canada. Like, who are we? Where do we live? Right.
Right. So important. And I wanted to mention something else because I want to get us to talk about our CF Global Network and what we're doing internationally, but I still want to stay focused on you and what you've done locally. But while we're talking about this, I want to point out something that speaks to exactly what you're talking about. I did a CF masterclass with Ilknur, who is in Istanbul in Turkey, and she is, you know, CF is probably 50 years behind in the Middle East, and she is where you were at when Madi was born. They had to go, each family, go to court and, you know, advocate for a medication. And only the wealthy families could afford to do it. it's not a surprise, right? So that when Beth, when you're talking about that, this is something in Canada, but also it's around the world. And this is a good example of what you're saying, is that we have to do it for the world. We can't just, I mean, to do it for every country. And that's when I wanted to get kind of to the zip codes that you talk about too, of how drugs, come
Postal,
about in Canada.
postal code lottery, we call it in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Canada, because we have a federal system that does some funding, but drugs are all done by the individual provinces, which are equivalent to states in the US. So we may have access to a drug in Ontario, where I live, but in British Columbia, the same patient would not have access because it hadn't been added to their provincial formulary. That's not right either. Like, just focusing on Canada, that's not okay. Like, you have to move your whole family and leave your careers and your homes to be able to. Many people do, because what other option do you have if you want your child to live? But in one country, you would think you would have equal access to life-saving therapies. I was getting to the rare disease drug strategy that was proposed in last year, 2023. We had $1.5 billion of funding, $500 million per year for the next 3 years, to focus on a rare disease drug strategy in support of patients that need these innovative therapies. They need a lot of things. We have not yet seen a dime been spent. It's been over a year. We've continued to advocate, but because of the disjointedness of the federal and provincial governments, nobody wants to step up and do the work and bring it together. And once again, it's the patients that always pick up the cost to this. And it's just very frustrating. And globally, like you said, there's different amounts of money available for drugs. There's different systems. There's different cultures. There are so much diversity in how these countries view rare diseases, view sick people and their value, sadly, but that's just the reality of it. How much money they want to spend on rare diseases and on sick. There has to be change, and it has to be done at a global level. And I think we have to come together to try and evoke change there as well, so that people are valued and people work together to allow people to thrive.
And and correct me if I'm wrong, with about a population of about 4,000 in Canada, how do things look today, and what still needs work from your perspective?
In Canada, I believe there are roughly 250 patients that have rare, ultra rare mutations. You've spoken to Vicky, her little 5-year-old boy. So these are at children and adults that in other parts of the world, the US included, despite having rare mutations, they do have access to drugs. And I think it's France, but they will at least trial the child or the patient on the drug and then decide from there, do they stay on it? If they're receiving benefit, they're funding the drug for them. In Canada, that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing patients being denied and not having access. We have patients that have ultra rare. I believe Vicky's son has a gene that is pretty rare. So to have the expectation of a manufacturer to go ahead and do trials, which we don't even have enough patients to do a trial, to get submitted and support the addition of this gene to our provincial formulary, it's not even possible. So they're just being left out. So that's where we are right now. I believe there are 18 rare mutations that are being added. We're hoping to be added to the formulary. However, there are more that need to be added, and people are being left out. So we're in the process of trying to see how government and pharma will work together to
And,
let them try.
right. And also, I believe, talking to Vicky Maldonado and Cambry White, because their children have the same rare mutation, it may be rare in Canada, but it isn't rare. It's
Absolutely.
indigenous and I believe Hispanic as well. So it's not rare to where they're living, but it's, it's more common in their native land. But
Absolutely.
it's just, yeah,
Point. Yeah, good point. It's just, yeah, our CF population, it's rare in Canada's CF population and not so much, I believe, in Ecuador, where their genetics are from, right? So,
right.
yeah, so, but regardless, taking it out of our CF population into rare, you know, there's, a child that has an ultra rare disease, and there could be two in Canada. Do they just not get the drug because they don't want to bring it to Canada and they don't have the trials to support it in Canada? Um, how do we get around that? How do we fix that? How do we make it fair for those patients that are being denied an opportunity at life? That's where we have to go.
Exactly. It's not fair. And moving forward, you and I have talked about raising awareness about all the challenges that all the other moms and dads we're talking to around the world in this CF Masterclass are facing, and we should all have the same access. And you and I are trying to do something about this to raise awareness. How are you feeling going forward, and what is your hope for everyone else's kids that have CF?
To be quite frank, it's a little overwhelming. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot, but somebody has to do it. And if we don't step up, then who's going to do it? And I don't think it's a matter of having an unfair expectation of one partner or the other. I think it's looking at each individual situation, and it's not going to be done overnight, but we have to look at the situations and address them where they are. Be it cultural, like I believe is it Egypt? You've been there a couple times,
Mm-hmm.
and you have supported their community greatly. If I'm correct, they don't even recognize CF as a disease in that country. Is that right?
That's correct, not yet. And Dr. Samia Nasser who's native to Egypt, has been working on this and getting access since 1997, I believe. And now
So
she's finally able to do some sweat testing and has diagnosed. I would have to check on the number currently, but I believe she has diagnosed about 1,000 people and anticipates thousands more.
So here, there's a challenge, and that challenge will be different than a challenge in, say, Africa. Like, so the challenge there, you have to start where you are. And if a disease is not recognized by the government and the health ministry, then that's where you start, and then you have to build from there. And it's sad and it's tragic, but there's not a lot can be done until you fix each problem going forward. So I think the challenge for us and anybody in our community that wants to work alongside us to try and address the inequities needs to realize there's inequities, but different ones everywhere around the world. What we experience in Canada is not the same as what you experience in the US. We all have our challenges, but they're all very different, and they can't all be fixed the same way. And I believe that government and pharma has to partner together where they are and work towards, um, making pathways to access for patients.
Right. And the insurance companies. And I think one
Yes.
thing that brought us together was, and again, something that goes back to what you said years ago when we started talking, was we can't just focus on one drug, because there will be another company. There are companies working on inhaled drugs
Mhm.
that would do the same thing for modulators. We can't just focus on one pharma or one drug. We have to fix the system, which you have beautifully stated here. Um, and we have to get that working better for all of us.
And that's so perfect. And that is just simply taking what I've always believed since day one in focusing on, just at the time, Kaleido was not going to fix everything for Orkambi, for Semdeco, and for Trikafta. It was a system issue, and it's the same globally. It's system issues that need to be addressed, because getting one drug in and fighting to get one drug in is not going to fix it for that 5-10% that are left that need Trikafta, are not going to fix for the new inhaled, and is not going to fix for any other rare disease the SMA, there's twins in the US I'm just reading about that need a drug, SMA drug, that their insurance has denied them for, and they need it in a small window of time. And this will let these two babies live amazing, healthy lives. And it's at a blockade right now. And people are trying to raise money for these two twins. They're newborns. I know they were 5 days old when I read the story, but how do we fix, we need to fix those in US, like the biggest,
Right.
strongest country in the world, and we're still facing these issues. How can you expect other parts of the world that aren't where we are to not have challenges as well? And we can't expect them to be fixed by one party. I just, that's just my
Right.
belief. I don't think we can put all the pressure on one. Do they need to be accountable, pharma as a whole, and come to the table? Absolutely. But it's everybody has to work together. You cannot put that all on one people, because if a country isn't recognizing your disease, it's going to be kind of hard to get your drug in there to to support them. And once again, when those 5 or 10% are left out, how's that going to help when another drug comes in, right?
And
Or
I,
a
right.
manufacturer has the answer. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say something we know so well is if we don't encourage research and development, who's going to invest in rare diseases?
Yeah,
No one.
that
And
that's
that's
the question, right? Like that's the answer, or the issue is understanding. Sadly, it's like large risk, large return. That's the business, like,
right.
and in my post that I did the other day about cystic fibrosis, we are so fortunate that our community was one that they chose to invest in to get us to this point. Like, and I'm thankful for that, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm thankful. Our daughters are here because of that investment, and that's a very risky investment. And to expect investors to invest and not have an expectation of a return when so many therapies, the majority, do not make it to patients and do not get funding or do not get funded for patients. um, if that is not at least part of the equation and not the entire one, then I don't think we're going to have any investment in rare disease, because it's just not going to be worth it. And that's a part where government can come forth, and the economics can be changed so that it's not expensive and more accessible. And that's why it takes everybody working, and with the patients as the focus. Like, I do believe that when they attack these diseases, they ultimately want to help, but business is part of it. They have answer to shareholders, and that's just a sad part. Until our governments are actually coming up and making these drugs and giving them to patients, that's what we have to deal with. That's part of reality, and we need to focus and part that as part of our solution process, right?
And I think as we wrap up here, what I want to talk about some more, because I really don't think yet. Well, people who know you know what a force you are, but I want people watching now to understand what a force you are and what a force Madi is. I want you to talk a little bit more about what it took as a mom to catapult yourself at such a high visibility level in Canada. Everyone knows who you are. People in the United States know who you are. Everybody I talk to does. And of course, before diagnosis, this wasn't on your radar. You never thought I'm going to be an advocate, and I'm sure Madi didn't either, but she has blossomed into this amazing advocate as well. So, just for a mom who might be getting diagnosed right now and be scared and think, I can't do what Beth does. I could never, I don't even understand half of the things about CF yet. So, we didn't start out as experts, right?
Right.
How did you get the strength and where you are now?
Okay. Firstly, I think what's really important for both of us, Laura, is to, and I did an interview with Patient Worthy recently, and one of the questions was very similar to this. And I think we all have to recognize who we are and what we have to bring, and accept that. So what I said in that interview was that, sometimes the best you can do is being the very best parent and caregiver to your child, and that's okay. You know what I mean? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think any of us should look past where we are and what we're able to give and have that expectation on ourselves, because not everyone can do it. And all our situations are different. I was fortunate enough, you were fortunate enough to be able to stay home and focus on our kids. Not everybody has that, right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you are able to sponsor a walker in a walk, take your child and your family to do the walk. And if that's the level that you can contribute, you are contributing. If you don't even have that and you're just being the best mom and caregiver to your child and getting to all the appointments and doing all the therapies, that's you're advocating for your child at that point. And I think that's very important, because I never want anybody to feel that they're less because they're not doing what we do.
Right.
Different stages of life. Like when I got into advocating, when Maddie needed that drug, I didn't have a choice. Like I really didn't have a choice. It was either step up or step out. And as moms, we do what we have to do.
Right.
Fortunately, I was home. I was able to take that time. I learned as I went. Um, I listened. I listened a lot and picked up and tried to learn. Um, I'm very passionate about it. I just have passion for what's right and what people should do to support other people and other patients, be it CF patients or rare disease patients. And when I see something that I don't think is right and that can be changed and improved, then that's just my heart just pushes, much like you. Like let's just get it done. So I think just allowing yourself grace to accept where you are, who you are, and what you're doing, and appreciate where you are. And then at different stages, like a baby is going to be hard to be out tracking around advocating. You know what I mean? If you've got a
Right.
baby, if you can, you do. But if you can't, then you just get to a point where, you know what, I think I have a little bit more to give. And you just kind of go at that. Um, but it doesn't hurt. I did a lot of reading. I continue to read everything I can to try and keep up on what's going on in Canada, the US, and around the globe, to try and keep myself informed. Um, I think my passion is the biggest, and Maddie as well. Like Maddie did take a step back from advocacy in, I believe, 2019. She had some mental health challenges. She's got a lot of PTSD, as many of our kids do, but she also,
Mm-hmm.
um, from the advocacy, like she was a tiny, tiny kid. And if anybody had seen any of her interviews when she was 11, she was doing scrums at Parliament at 11. So not only was she fighting for disease, she was fighting for a drug to save her life. And I don't know what that tells a kid when you have to fight your government and show and make them see your value to save your life. I think that's
Right.
pretty heavy burden to bear. And so in 2019, basically when Trikafta was just, we were trying to get it into Canada, she took a step back. However, you know what? She showed up. We met with health ministers. She was there. We did interviews. She was there. She did what she had to do, despite how she was feeling. Lately, she's come back. She's a force again, and she's being recognized for her efforts. And I'm extremely proud, as we have, of all our kids that deal with, these life challenges and still continue on with positivity and living their best life. So, yeah, no, I just am very passionate about the change that needs to be made, and I don't want to stop until we have it.
I agree. And I think that's a really important point. And it's good to know when you have to take a step back, whether it's the child or the person with CF or the parent,
Yeah,
because you have to regroup sometimes in order to move forward or to learn or to process. So it's really important.
100%.
All good points. Well, thank you for sharing some of your journey um, with us and helping other CF parents stay motivated and keep fighting regardless of where they are in the world.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thanks for having on. And I enjoy working alongside you so much. And I am so inspired by all that you do as well in the US for the CF community and rare diseases. And your advocacy is brilliant and appreciated by many. So thank you so much. And we are stronger together for sure.
We are. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.